Okay, so now we're going to explore using the Shape Builder tool. So this is somewhat similar to the Shaper tool that we were just using. And just like the Pathfinder panel, this tool allows you to manually add shapes together and subtract shapes apart. And you can also edit individual stroke paths, as we'll see as we go through. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we can do with this tool. The first thing I need to do is actually create some shapes that I can work with. So in this case, I'm going to create this circle shape, and I'll change that color to a red. And then I'm going to make a rectangle. So I'll start from this center of the circle, hold down on the Alt key, and that allows me to create a rectangle right from the center. I'll change the color to blue. I'll choose my black arrow, and I will rotate this. So I'll choose the rotate tool, find that center, hold down on Alt key and click, and this time I'm going to rotate it at 45 degrees. I'll make a copy and duplicate that. Okay, here's the basic process for this tool. First, we need to select all the shapes that we need to use using the black arrow tool. Okay, after we selected those shapes, then we need to actually use the shape builder tool, and we will go over the options for using that with the gap detection options. And then basically you're gonna hover inside and click and drag over shapes, and by default it adds shapes, but if we want to subtract shapes we need to use the Alt key. So let's go ahead and do that. Select all the shapes. I'll hit Shift M, or I can come over here and find the tool. And I'll zoom in just a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and combine these shapes. So I'm just going to click and drag, and you can see it's making a line that follows the path of my mouse input. So I'm combining all these shapes together. And now I actually want to subtract parts of all these intersections. So I'm going to hold down on the Alt key. And now I'm going to click and drag and release the mouse first, then release the Alt key. You can see it's subtracted out those shapes. I'll do the same thing again. And this time I'll see how far I can go without making a mistake. Okay. And I'll get rid of this last one. And there we go. So now we've made a bunch of individual shapes that we can work with. We've combined some and subtracted others. So let's go ahead and get some practice actually making some glyph icons, and then finally with some line icons. Let's start over here with this kind of beaker glyph shape. I'll start by drawing an ellipse, getting it roughly to the size of that outline. And I'll choose my rectangle tool, and I'll make a rectangle that goes down into there. And then I will choose an ellipse. I'll start from here, make that the size of my rectangle. I'll nudge that up and go back to my black arrow and make that a little bit bigger. While I'm here, I'm going to copy this, Command C, and then Command Shift V to paste in place. And I will size that other ellipse down. This is going to be the opening. And now that I'm here, I'll start using the shape builder. So I'll select all the shapes. I'll hit Shift and M. I want to combine these bottom shapes. Then I'll zoom in, and what I want to do is combine this top part and subtract out this bottom part. So now we're left with two shapes, this bottom part and the top part. We'll go ahead and select the bottom, and I want to kind of give this look as though it's kind of glass that you can see through. So I'm going to actually go back to using the offset path. So with it selected, I'm going to go to Object, Path, and Offset Path. I want to offset the path in the negative direction. I'll put a minus sign in front of that and just get a preview. And that looks like about right, whatever 1389. And then I'll click OK. I'll use my white arrow tool, and I'll select these 3 points here at the top, and I will use the arrow tool and just move those up. And now that I have those, I'll go back to my black arrow, and I will select all the shapes involved. I'll hit Shift M to access the shape builder, and now I will delete that inside, and I will combine this part. In order to change the colors, we actually need to be using our black arrow. Select it, I'll take off the stroke, and I'll change it to a darker color. Cool, let's try another one. Try this phone glyph. I'll go ahead and use my rounded rectangle. I'll switch the stroke and the fill. Now I can kind of see the lines or the paths that I'm making. So I'll make that first one, and I'll just do Command C, Command Shift V to make a copy of that, and I'll use my black arrow and size that new rounded rectangle. And while I have it selected, I want to make those corners not so rounded. So I can come right up here to my control panel, and I have this little corner type option. I'm going to bring the radius down on that corner and then click OK. I'll make one more rounded rectangle here at the top. Command click when I'm done. And then I need a circle here at the bottom. Now that I have all of those selected, I'm going to show you another way of working with the Shape Builder tool. So I'm actually going to choose the color that I want to fill in as I add shapes together. So in this case, I do want to use this dark gray. I will select all those shapes. I'll choose my Shape Builder first, so Shift M. And then I will choose the color that I want to fill in as I use the Shape Builder. So for instance, if I now hover inside and click, so it added all those shapes and it added the fill color. Subtract out these shapes and then click the V for the black arrow, and now we have that one done. Let's go ahead and try this camera shape. So I'm going to use my rectangle tool, and I'm going to start with just some hard edges first. Shift X so I can see the paths that I'm working on. I'll take off the fill. Okay, I'll do another one here. Choose my ellipse tool, and I will make one ellipse first. Command C, Command Shift V, and I will make the second concentric circle. And then I'll end this with the rounded rectangle tool for this aperture. Okay, so now I will select all of those shapes, choose my Shape Builder, Shift M. I'll choose the color that I want to fill the shapes with as I use the Shape Builder, and I'll zoom in a little bit. So I'll start to add these shapes together. I'll add this center one. I'll subtract out this outline. I'll hold down on the Alt key and I'll subtract out this shape. I'll actually just select these corners individually. So I'll select those, hold down on the Shift key, select those, select these and these. And now I will hover on those corner targets and round out those edges. I'll hit the V key when I'm done. Okay, let's try one more. So this one I'll actually start with the polygon tool, and I'll click and drag and bring down the sides to make a triangle. I'll hold down on the Shift key to keep that at a right angle. Hold down on the space bar and drag that into place. Bounce back and forth between the two, and I'll take off the fill. So now I'll go ahead and use my white arrow key, or white arrow tool, and I will bring up this point about right there. Okay, now I'll go back to my rectangle tool, drag a rectangle from this center. So hovering over that anchor, holding down on the Alt key, now I can make a rectangle that goes symmetrically right over that. Okay, I'll come over here and I'll choose my rounded rectangle tool, and I'll draw this part. I'll go ahead and just use that same one, knowing that I'm just going to use it to kind of cut out this portion. And then the last shape I need to use is my ellipse tool right here. Okay, so now that I have all of my shapes made for that, I'll select it all with the black arrow tool. Okay, I'll choose my Shape Builder and I'll set the color. I'll start adding the shapes. So I'm just clicking and dragging over. I'm going to zoom in and I'll hold down on the Alt key to subtract the shapes. Subtract that shape. And then I'll zoom out, and there we go. Now just so you know, when we work with the Shape Builder, it has some options when we're working. So I'll go ahead and double click that Shape Builder tool. We have this thing called the gap detection option. What it's doing is, even if shapes don't completely intersect, it'll assume that if they're really close, that you want those to read either as one shape or you want to subtract those shapes. So if ever you find that the Shape Builder isn't quite recognizing intersecting shapes, try using the gap detection. So you can actually set either a small gap detection or large, and even custom. You can say, hey, if you see shapes that are within this distance between each other, just read them as one. You can also change how to combine your shapes. Right now we've been doing the freeform, but you can also select those in a straight line. So I'll go ahead and I'll just leave this at medium and click OK. So let's finish up using the Shape Builder by working just with lines. So I'm going to start down here and I'll use my ellipse tool. And essentially I'm going to make, I think, 5 circles. So one here, and I'll just copy this and size it up. And one here. copy this and move it. And then one more right here. Okay, now I'll select all of those and I'll hit Shift M. Now the difference when we work with the shape builder now is instead of hovering inside of the shapes and looking for this kind of filled in screen pattern, I'm gonna hover over these lines and I'll kind of zoom in to show you what this is gonna do. I'm going to hold down on the Alt key because I want to subtract shapes, and watch as I hover over this line, the highlight gets thicker. So if I click, you can see it'll actually subtract those lines that I'm highlighting. I'm going to go through and just edit the lines. If you happen to click inside here, don't worry, but try to avoid doing that. Just hover over and click the lines. I'm going to use the space bar to kind of move, and then hold down on the Alt key and keep subtracting lines that I don't need. That looks about right. Well, when I'm done, I'll hit the V key and zoom out, and I will increase the size of those strokes so you can see that better. All right, let's try it one more time. So this time we're going to work with some of these lines. I'm going to use my ellipse tool and make my first ellipse. Okay. I'll do Command C, Command Shift V, and I will make a concentric circle that I know I'm going to end up kind of modifying. And I'm going to use the ellipse tool. I know that I kind of want to break up some of these lines. I'm going to just draw an ellipse here, here, and then a small one right here. Because I'm looking, I want to subtract some of these parts, but I'm just going to use other shapes to do that. I'm also going to use a larger ellipse to create kind of this curve. So I'll select this shape and I will copy it, and I'm trying to match the curve of those lines. Okay, let's go ahead and do a shape build real quick just with these ones. So I'll select all of those. I'll zoom in here. I'll hit Shift and M, and I will start to modify by subtracting out some of these other lines. Now when you have lines that are on the outside, you can just click and drag through them because we're not going to have to worry about them. They're on the outside of our final shape. But these lines here in the center, we don't want to do that. This is kind of a roundabout way of I wanted to just modify just two lines over here and then have this shape right here that I can put these other lines in. And it looks like I should have kept a little bit more of those lines, but okay. I'll come in here with my line segment tool and I'll click and drag and draw a line segment through there. I'll hit the V key and then I will copy this. We have to be a little bit more aware of how we're copying it because I know I'm going to duplicate it, and as it duplicates, it's going to run along the axis that I copied it at. So I'll kind of get it to right there. Release the mouse, release the Alt key, and then do Command D a few times. Yeah, it looks like that one didn't quite make it, so I'll use my white arrow tool. I'll click that point, and then I will drag it, and I'll use the Smart Guides to kind of line that up. Okay, so once I have all those lines, I'll select them all with the black arrow. I'll hit Shift M for the shape builder. I'll hold down on the Alt key because I know I just need to delete lines. I'll come in here and I will start to delete all these unnecessary parts of the line. I'm just left with something like that. I'll actually go back. I need to make sure that as I do this, that I delete it in a certain way. Otherwise, we'll delete whole segments. We need to have intersections in order to delete those. And that looks about right. I'll hit the V key and click. And I'll go ahead and choose that outline, that larger shape on the outline, and I will increase the stroke weight, and I'll add a fill color. Let's use a gray. Okay, and so that's a pretty thorough overview of using the shape builder tool. We'll be using it a lot more in the future.